Hey everyone, Mike here from The Art of Guitar. I'm here today with a video that I'm excited for because I love going down memory lane, as you know. And I'm thinking back to when I was teaching full-time private lessons, and I had a student who was like a rock, heavy metal type student, and he was really into playing crazy riffs and licks. And one day we were just talking about famous acoustic songs, and I brought up Wonderwall. And you know how that song's kind of become a joke over the years? It's like a meme now. It's kind of the new Freebird in a weird way. Well, my student, who's pretty young, kind of laughed and rolled his eyes, and I'm like, I know people make fun of Wonderwall, but I rarely see people play it correctly. And then a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought this would be the perfect time to do one of my famous challenges. And I said to him, you know what, if you could play Wonderwall correctly, just the first two measures, then you could have bragging rights. You know, you could say I told you so. But if you can't play it correctly, you have to learn it in depth. You have to learn it the exact way. And he shook his head because he thought this is going to be an easy bet to win. It's just like 4 chords. It's a simple strum pattern. Let's go. So at the time we didn't have a capo in the room, so we just did it without, but today I'll just leave it on so it sounds more like the real song. Well, I showed him the 4 chords: E minor 7, G, D sus, A7 sus. And then he got really excited because look at this. These 2 fingers get to stay down the entire time. The other 2 are doing other things, but these get to stay right where they are. So he probably thought it was going to be a slam dunk at that point. So he messed around a little bit with it, and then he eventually played it like this. Now, if we would have bet money, he probably would have put out his hand and said, pay up, right at that point, because it felt like he actually pulled it off. And I was actually pretty impressed because his chord changes were really smooth, so I was really happy about that. But then I had to smack him with the truth. I was like, you know what? You remind me a lot of me back when I thought songs that were overplayed or that I heard my whole life were simple, when there's actually way more depth to them than I thought. And he was like, Mike, why are you like this? You know, because as a teacher, I love to do these goofy challenges, and I like to find new and exciting ways to teach lessons. And this is just one of my ways. And I said, you know what? You played it just fine. You know, I see a lot of people play it like that. But what if I were to tell you, you only played about 25% of it correctly? And he couldn't believe it. He's like, you play it. Let's see what it's really like. Luckily, I had to learn that song quite a few times for other students, so I had it in my head already. But I went like this. Now, I thought he was going to be like, oh, that's what I played, though. But he didn't. He actually heard the difference. And then I said, okay, so if you agree that you didn't play it correctly, you have to learn it the right way. So back then, I just used a piece of paper and I drew down all these arrows. But for you guys, I'll do my fancy, you know, modern Adobe Illustrator version so you could see clearly what I was writing. So the first thing I did was I made a bunch of empty arrows like this. And I said, this is actually what Noel Gallagher's arm is doing while he's strumming this. And it's just a bunch of down and up arrows, not stopping, just continuously going. So I said, watch my arm as I strum the correct way. Do you notice how it doesn't ever stop? There's never any herky-jerkiness to it. That's very important. The next thing I did was I blackened in some of the empty arrows. And I said, this is actually where your pick makes contact with the string. So even though your arm might be moving the entire time consistently, you don't always pick the strings. Only on the black arrows are you going to make contact. And then I played that. He's like, are you sure that's right? So I sped it up. He's like, okay, that sounds pretty close. I think he made a comment that it sounded a lot like Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix if I just added a wah pedal, which is true. And then I took the pen and made little X's in certain arrows. So on the screen, you're going to see little red asterisk looking markings. That's what I did with the X's. And I said, that's where the accents are. So that's where you have to hit it a little bit harder. So that changes it to this now. He seemed to get that concept right away because I'd love to teach people accents pretty early when they start playing. That way they really know how to feel a strum pattern when it's correct, when it's really locked on the rhythm. I do this a lot on the website, by the way. And then I was like, okay, now we have to just add the chords. But here's the problem. When you played it, it sounded very straightforward like this. See how all the chord changes that my student was doing are on the down strums? Change right there. switch, switch. I was like, did you know 3 of the chords are actually changed on upstrokes? So it's like a syncopated chord change. It's very confusing feeling at first until you really lock it down. His eyes lit up again. I just kept seeing all these light bulbs going off in his head. It was a real like Mr. Miyagi Danielson type moment, I felt. I still get excited thinking about that. Whenever something clicked in someone's mind for the first time, it's such a cool thing because I know that feeling. It's one of the best feelings ever when you're trying to learn something. So then I played it again slowly with the accents, with the chord changes, and with the correct strumming. Sounded like this. Sped up. He thought I was done with my lesson, but I told him there's one more thing that you have to do, and he looked a little bit disappointed because I already gave him a whole bunch of stuff to work on. But I had to let him know that this might be just an incidental thing that Noel Gallagher does when he naturally plays, but if you really want to sound close to the album, you have to throw it in. And that's when he lifts up some of his fingers to do chord changes or just to do a certain sound during one of the chords. You could hear him go from the D sus to the A7 sus by lifting up. So there is one arrow where he doesn't actually play the chord because he's transitioning. So I made those arrows that he's transitioning gray for you on the graphic. The first gray arrow is the transition to the A7 sus. And then while he's playing that chord, he actually lifts his index finger up a couple of times. There's the first time, and then he puts it back down, and then he lifts it up again. I think that's to transition back into the first chord, which is the E minor 7. So if you add that, it sounds like this now. It might not seem very significant, like you might have barely even heard it, but listen real carefully inside the chords and you'll hear this. There's a little melodic line hiding inside. Now listen for it this time. Did you hear that? The first time I heard it, I almost fell over because I'm like, that's so cool that there's a melody hiding inside those chord changes. Whether it was on purpose or not, doesn't really matter. It's there. So if you really want to sound authentic, try to throw that in there at least once in a while. So it took some time, but after my student finally nailed it, he was real excited, I think, to pull it off, but also that there's so much depth in a riff that he thought was actually really simple. So I'm just going to leave you with the 2 different versions so that you can see one more time the contrast between what people think it is versus what it really is. And hopefully it'll inspire you to not only try to learn this riff the correct way, but also other riffs that you might take for granted, the basic way. Closer to the real way. Okay, have fun with that. If you do want to learn it in depth, I did the whole song on the website. It's getting uploaded tonight, maybe tomorrow, but hopefully we'll see you there. Otherwise, we'll catch you here on YouTube for the next video. Okay, thank you guys. See ya. Oh, I caught it. Weird.